न svātmanā nirodhosti nirodho न parātmanā utpādasya yathotpādo nātmanā न parātmanā.
svātmanā nirodhasya nirodho no parātmanā utpādasya yathotpādo nātmanā na parātmanā. MMK chapter 7 verse 32. The ending of death is neither by one's own self nor via the other, just as the beginning of going up is neither by oneself nor via the other. So in between commenting on this verse and commenting on verse 31, just went and sat outside in the sunshine, which, as you can see, we have February the middle of February, but it's a very warm, glorious, sunny day. And so I found myself talking about God in comment to verse 30, and where I've just been sitting after the rain of last week. The stream is gushing by outside by the side of my neighbour's field. You can hear all the high frequency sounds from the gurgling stream as it rushes by, and the birds are starting to sing. I'm sitting outside with the sunshine on my face there. About maybe 12, 15 years ago, while I was sitting out there, I remember writing a poem, and one of the lines in it were, "Where words and birds and God are one." And that sort of religious sense of being close to God, I think I lost it big time around 2006, when Nishijima was getting old and making one or two decisions that I found very, very upsetting and kind of drawing me into this kind of religious bunch of nonsense. And as I was starting to say last time, it really made me want to puke. Anything to do with religion, I didn't want to know about it, And religion, as Marjorie Barlow used to say, I'm a Christian if I'm anything, although I do reserve an affection for the Buddha. She said it like that. But her kind of Christianity had nothing to do with what religion is usually about, which is fixing. And Nāgārjuna can really understand as help what that fixing is, because you can't fix to what's empty. You can't fix to a happening. If God is a happening, if Dharma is a happening, to fix to them in a sort of an Islamic kind of fundamentalist way is just misguided and mistaken. And furthermore, it's not what pleases God. I had a funny feeling yesterday of being, although I was sort of swearing and angry and being my old angry habitual self, saying, that's crap, you haven't been looking at the meaning of ikatve. I felt I slept very well last night, and I woke up thinking, well, maybe it was like I'm somehow being affirmed for that attitude, even though a part of me might suspect that there's something wrong and imperfect about it. It's almost as if there's a chapter of Shobo Genzo called Juki, which means affirmation, or more literally, receiving the Buddha's prediction that you'll become Buddha, it refers to. But Nishijima Sensei, he liked the translation affirmation, and I think if I remember rightly, he used the example of on the Titanic, the people who let the women and children go first and went down with the ship, they received affirmation. So affirmation is, not a written document. It's like the universe is pleased. God, you've acted so as to please God. And I say go back again. The first time I really got disillusioned with religion or God was, as I mentioned, and then digressed. My mother, when I was very young, told me that God was all around, and that idea kind of appealed to me, So I went off to the local church. I wanted to learn how to pray. That was a definite idea I had. I wanted to learn how to pray. And again, it was the person I regarded, that I looked to for teaching, was some wanker of a Church of England vicar who gave me a book that you were supposed to put a stamp in every time you attended Sunday school. So I was totally disgusted, and never went. From that time on, I was not the slightest bit interested in Christianity anyway. I was just very disillusioned by that. So just sitting outside again and thinking about this verse. Well, not even thinking about it, actually, just taking a rest, having commented on the last verse. And then the words of this verse started sort of reciting themselves to me. And it caused me, at the last moment, to change the translation quite radically. Before, I'd had it as a nirodhasya, nirodho, as the death of death. And 3 or 4 days ago, it was the cessation of cessation. Then a couple of days ago, I started realising that nirodha as death carries more sort of practical impact than ontological discussion of cessation. Cessation is something that we've been considering in light of the Buddha's teaching of the nirodhasya, the truth of cessation. But death is more an archetypal concern, isn't it? That's deeper. When we start talking about death, that's a bit more real than philosophical consideration of what the Buddha meant by cessation. So death is a weightier word. And I think that's what Nāgārjuna in this utpādasya sthiti bhanga, you see, utpada is going up, arising, genesis, sthiti staying still, stasis, bhanga, dissolution. And the level of intellectual thinking, the level of the Abhidharma commentators, bhanga means cessation, dissolution. And so it's got an ontological meaning. But death has got a deeper meaning, which J. Garfield and Siddhartha Katsura, I didn't check out what David Kalapana wrote, but it's probably the same along ontological lines. But J. Garfield in particular tries to make himself sound so clever. I can't imagine that if God were looking down at J. Garfield's efforts, that he would regard J. Garfield as having written in a way that pleased God. God might rather say, be still. Here's, according to the animated, vivacious philosophical thoughts of J. Garfield, verse 32 goes, cessation does not cease by means of itself, nor does it cease by means of another, just as arising cannot arise from itself or from another arising. Just as arising cannot arise from itself or from another arising. Then here is the oh so clever comment. This verse has an exact parallel in 725. Again, Nāgārjuna recalls the uncomfortable choice between a trivially begged question and a vicious regress, presented originally in the context of the discussion of arising, and recalled in the discussion of stasis. The argument applies mutatis mutandis to cessation. The conclusion of this trio of arguments is that we cannot conceive of any of the three characteristics of dependent arising as self-grounded. All must be understood dependently and hence as empty. So, Siddhartha and Katsura also follow the same line of reasoning. The cessation of cessation does not take place by means of itself, nor does it take place by means of another cessation, just as the origination of origination is not by means of itself or by means of another origination. And here's their commentary. Cessation must itself cease, lest it continue on forever. What makes it cease? The cessation of the milk cannot be what makes that very cessation cease. But if there is a distinct cessation that makes the cessation cease, we have the start of an infinite regress. So both those two have understood this thing in logic or philosophy, the infinite regress. So the origination of origination has its origination in origination, and so on and so on forever. Okay, so that both of them can get their little heads around that ontological issue. But what Nāgārjuna is talking about, it struck me as I just sat now in the garden. So I was still sort of partially. I'd made a note to refer back to chapter 1, verse 1. Nā svāto nāpi parāto nādvābyam nāpya yathotpādo utpādasya vidyante bhavaha kvachana kechana. So, not any existent things anywhere have arisen at all. Svāto, from self, parāto, from others, dvābyam, from a combination of self and others, nāpya yathotpādo, nor either from no cause. So here again we've got na svātmanā, na parātmanā. So svātmanā means, atman means self and sva means self. So sva plus atman means one's own self. And atmanā is instrumental singular, so by one's own self, by its own self, parātmanā, by the other. And so both Garfield and Siddhartha and Katsura take the self and the other to mean nirodha itself or another nirodha. I mean, Siddhartha and Katsura, just for the sake of clarification, which I wouldn't criticise that, there's nothing wrong with, adding something to make it more clear. They actually added the word another cessation. The cessation of cessation does not take place by means of itself, nor does it take place by means of another cessation. But as I just sat there thinking about the meaning of God, not as a old guy with a beard, a deity, an absolute thing, but rather as a happening, that made me think, what might Nāgārjuna mean by svātmanā and parātmanā? Because usually, when we're thinking about God and we're thinking about prayer, that was again, I've always been interested in how to pray in a certain way, how to practice zazen. Nishijima Sensei once told me, and I wrote it at the beginning of a How to Practice Zazen book. I think I wrote it there. Wrote it down anyway, to remember the teaching. He said, to study Buddhism is to study how to practice Zazen. To study the Buddha's teaching is to study how to practice Zazen. That's that's what I've been aiming all these years to understand, really. That's why I came back to England to train as an Alexander technique teacher, to understand how to practice Zazen. At that time, my conception was that Zazen was the most physical thing there is, a kind of physical gymnastics, Nishijima Sensei once said. And so I was interested in body work and thought Alexander sounded like an extremely good kind of body work. And so it took several years for me to be disabused of that notion, especially by Marjorie Barlow, who emphasised again and again, this is the most mental thing there is. Alexander used to say to his students, any of you can do what I do, because he had amazing hands, bring about tremendous change with his hands. Any of you can do what I do if you do what I did. In other words, go back and investigate for yourself how I made my discoveries. But, he added, none of you wants anything mental. Thy will be done. You see, thy will be done is the most mental thing there is. That thy will be done. I don't know how many years ago it was. Again, probably going back before 2006, 2007. One lovely sunny day, I was riding back from Conwisteram, the port, on my Yamaha 900 motorbike, and just thought I'd call in at the cemetery, Commonwealth Cemetery. Rows and rows and rows of white headstones in a very well tended cemetery. The French don't forget quickly how they were helped out in World War II. But rows and rows and rows of headstones, and many of them, thy will be done. Parents had written on the headstones of their dead 19, 20, 21-year-old sons, or sometimes it was the wives of dead soldiers. Thy will be done. It's so moving, no one could really walk along there without the tears welling up and rolling down. The strength that people had in those days, thy will be done. You've lost your nearest and dearest, and the kind of strength of character to say thy will be done. Weighed against that sort of discussion of ontological discussion of cessation somehow just seems very shallow and nothing to be proud of. Svātmanā nirodhasya nirodho parātmanā. The ending of death is neither by one's own self nor via the other. So I'm suggesting that the ending of death is the beginning of going up. Really going up. Not sitting there thinking you can do the up like a fucking idiot. But be still and know that I am God. There's nothing you can do yourself. You can't. What do you know about going up? When you stop trying to do it and allow it to happen, then the beginning of going up can be the real ending of death. And that is the meaning, I would suggest, of the backward step. The backward step is not the cessation of something. But this is what I was already prepared to say, that it's not the backward step is not the cessation of bhava, a thing. Because back to verse 1, svātmanā napi parātmanā, neither from self nor from other have any things at all ever arisen. Navidyante, things are not found arising anywhere at all. So in that sense, there's no cessation of cessation. But that's still not a deep enough understanding of what he's saying. You can go back still further. The backward step is asking us to go back to retreat from. If we think we've understood something, then that's still not the backward step. The backward step is more, the hands are like this. It's like, I haven't got a fucking clue. Please guide me. Something, please guide me. That's what these last 13 years have been about, really, because 2006, 2007, 2008, I had this really bad pain in my stomach. And it went away as soon as I dived into Asvaghosha. Something guided me to do Asvaghosha first and then Nāgārjuna. And it hasn't been a bed of roses, but I haven't had that stomach pain for the last 13 years. And it sort of brought me back again. I was just reflecting to the truth that when you're sitting with ekatve, truly in oneness, then words and birds and God are one. So, what does it mean? What does it mean to practice Zazen? What does it mean to pray? What does it mean to take the backward step? Well, that's what this verse is about, I think. It's the ending of death. The ending of death. Because death is a non-empty concept. When we worry about death, that's prapancha. That's turning. Here we are with the opportunity to explore what's happening. Our life can be a happening. And we worry about this thing called death. So the ending of death means stop worrying about death, because there is no non-empty thing. A happening, if your life is a happening, it has no beginning and no end, because a happening is empty. It's anirodham and utpādam, beyond death, beyond birth. So how does one do that? Well, it's the backward step of turning one's light and letting it shine. Or you might say it's true prayer. But the kind of prayer I'm talking about is not petitional prayer or devotional prayer. Someone once told me, a Christian friend I had in Japan once told me, those are the two kinds of prayer, devotional prayer and petitional prayer. So I remember saying, well, Zazen is more like devotional prayer in that case, because you're not asking for anything. Maybe you are asking for something, actually. If you ask for let the neck be free, let the neck be free, to let the head go forward and up, is a kind of asking for something. And but the point that emptiness clarifies is that if it's devotional and if it's petitional, you're not asking something. It's not that God is the other. You're not asking the other for something, and you're not devoting yourself to God as the other. So in that case, parātmanā, via the other, might not necessarily mean, as Siddharis and Katsaris have interpreted, via another cessation. It could mean via the other, any other. And the other with a capital O might be God, as hitherto conceived. But in that case, what this verse is asking us to do is to rethink our understanding of Dharma, or God, or the higher power, the universe, whatever you want to call it, Dharma. If Dharma is an empty happening, if God is an empty happening, then it or he is not the other. The ending of death is neither by one's own self nor via the other. So equally, still more obviously, the backward step is not something that I can forcibly implement. You know, there's a kind of a sense of grace, especially if you're sitting outside in a beautiful place by the forest, sun shining and the birds singing and the stream gushing by. There's no way I can have that kind of experience of oneness if I'm somewhere noisy. Aircraft are flying about and traffic noises around. You know, it's just a different level of. It's a state of grace, really, to be in a natural place a day like today. So it's not something I can do by inhibiting and directing. My wife said this to me several times over the years, also an Alexander technique teacher. When we practice outside in the garden, she would say that you don't have to inhibit and direct. You know, it's there already. What we're working towards when we give Alexander directions, that sense of being up is sort of inherently already there. You know, you haven't really. It's like the difference between targeting. Directing is targeting. Then, as was mentioned earlier in this chapter, what we're really hoping for is to go beyond the targeting. Let's see if I can find the verse in question. I might have to just temporarily stop the recording. So it was verse 3. If a different order of targeting of contrivance is present in going up, staying still and cessation, in this way there is non-finality. So the first three padas affirm targeting of contrivance, which is another way of saying directing the head forward and up, for example. Then the fourth pada says, if no targeting is present, they are not contrived. And that's what my wife's talking about. You know, directing, however valuable it is, there's me asking for something, or me devoting myself to something. But if no targeting is present, that's nirvana, the uncontrived. That might be nirvana. So, once more, we're on verse 32. 2 verses left before the end of the chapter. I defer to Professor Kasinath Nyalpane, whose Sanskrit recitation is always beautiful.
न svātmanā nirodhosti nirodho na parātmanā utpādasya yathotpādo nātmanā na parātmanā.
Okay, just notice that beautiful the reciting is, it's based on the unamended text. So Louis Valet de Poisson had nirodhosti, and the amended version is nirodhasya in the first pada. Svātmanā nirodhasya nirodho na parātmanā utpādasya yathotpādo nātmanā na parātmanā.